Hey everyone, I hope you're having a great week. On the exercise of the week, this week we're going to cover what's called hip external rotation, PAILs and rails. So hip external rotation is simply a motion. If we think traditionally like the pigeon stretch position, right, that's putting the hip in an externally rotated position. One thing we need to do a better job of is we're trying to improve overall hip range of motion is work on internal and external rotation first. Why that is because it helps open up more space in the joint capsule. And if we're someone that's, again, saying my hip flexors are tight, my hamstrings are tight, and we just always go after hip flexors and hamstrings, a lot of times we don't get range of motion as quickly as we can because we need to open up more capsular space, and that's where the hip external rotation stretch today really comes in. Now, PAILs and rails is a way to not just sit into a stretch position for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, or more than that, or what have you. It's a way to get into a position, actively fire the lengthened tissue, actively fire the shortened tissue to really teach the brain, the nervous system, the joint, all of these different areas together at the same time how to function at a better end length. We don't want to just open up range of motion for the sake of it, but not be able to access that range of motion. We want to expand our range of motion if necessary, but also be able to move and function in that range of motion so it's more of a usable range of motion rather than just something we have but we never really tap into. So that's where PAILs and rails comes in. So our position today is going to be what's called the 90-90 position, just to show you, and I'll show you a couple different angles, just to make sure your setup is proper. As opposed to traditional pigeon, right, coming over that front leg, we're going to, again, try to be up as tall as we can, bring this knee straight in front of the hip, bring this shin out to the side, so you have a 90-degree angle right here. Back leg, we have the knee straight out to the side, we have the shin straight down, we have perfect 90-degree angles in both spots. Now, if we look at that from the side, we can see those angles here, right? 90 degrees, good alignment, so we are up nice and tall. One thing you need to consider here, some people, or some of you, are going to be very tight in this position. If that's you, we simply modify, rather than being upright, because you're going to feel like it's really hard to get into that position, we can either bring the hand further out to the side. You can see that that allows me to get out of that position slightly. I can go down to the forearm, or I can actually go side lying completely if I needed to. That's a way to regress this position if that's too hard for you. Now, all we're going to do here is, as we're in this 90-90 position, we're focusing on external rotation. You can already see I'm in an externally rotated position at the hip of this front leg. I'm going to set myself up nice and tall, good posture, chest up. And then from there, I'm going to find my end range of motion at this front hip. So I'm going to simply start to hinge forward at the hip joint. I'm not rounding or folding forward. I'm staying tall through my spine. I'm hinging forward at the hip and I'm finding my end range of motion. That's about it right there for me. Big stretch in the back side of this right hip, those hip external rotators, posterior glute med, and those other muscles down there. For the PAILs and rails now, what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna hold this position for 2 minutes. Okay? A lot of the research on stretching, mobility, gaining range of motion shows we need to hold these positions a lot longer than we typically are. So sitting in that position for 2 minutes, breathing. Nice deep breath if you can, breathing into the abdominal space using the diaphragm. So trying to get that uncomfortable stretching sensation to almost soften to a degree, right? We're trying to let that melt away as we get more comfortable, as we breathe, as we release some tension and tone in the tissue. Once I finish the 2 minutes, this is where the important part begins, right? So now we're going to do what's called the PAILs contraction. Like I mentioned before, we're going to actively engage the lengthened tissue. So I'm lengthening these hip rotators on the back side of the hip, which means if I drive my knee, my shin, and my ankle down into the floor, I'm going to actively engage those tissues. I'm going to ramp up in intensity from 0, it can be all the way up to 100%. If you're someone that's experiencing pain in the hip, pain somewhere, we probably don't want to go that extreme, but for a healthy hip that you're trying to really access more range of motion in, you want to push down nice and strong. So I'm here, I'm tall, I'm already hinged, I've been stretching for 2 minutes. I'm going to actively drive this shin down into the ground. I'm feeling those muscles through the back side of the hip because they are in a stretched or lengthened position, and I'm firing them. I'm building up in intensity, 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and I'm building up, I'm pushing harder and harder into the ground, right? A lot of times when it comes to joint range of motion, we want to teach the brain and the nervous system that it's okay to get into this position, that we're comfortable and we're supported in that position. We're not just hanging out here aimlessly with the body that thinks, man, you're gonna pull something, right? I'm actively able to engage my muscles and create some tension. So I'm telling the brain and nervous system it's okay as I build a level of neuromuscular control and strength at this end range of motion. So after I build up 0 to up to 180 to 100% over 15 seconds, I'm going to relax that contraction to the back of the hip. I'm going to engage the abs, engage the hip flexor, and I'm going to actively try to pull myself deeper into the range of motion. So I'm using the core, I'm using the hip flexor over 15 seconds, and I'm pulling myself deeper. I feel that stretch increase in the back side of the hip over 15 seconds, and then I'm going to relax for 30 seconds. So over the course of that, which is really in the end a 3-minute drill, we have 2 minutes worth of stretching, find your range of motion. Again, just going to just hold, relax in that position, focus on some diaphragmatic breathing. 15 seconds, driving the shin down, creating tension, ramping up 0 to 100%. Relaxing that, engaging the hip flexor and the core, ramping up intensity as I pull forward over 15 seconds, and then just relaxing as I'm deeper in that range of motion, right? So with this whole PAILs and rails, this is something that, even though I'm showing you that in this position, this can be executed in any single drill you're in, whether you're doing a hip flexor stretch, whether you're doing an adductor rocking, standing quad stretch. Do that PAILs and rails more, because it's not just focusing on, can we lengthen one individual tissue or group of tissues, right? Not just stretching the hip. We're strengthening around the joint, building better joint health, taking into consideration the brain and nervous system, the joint capsule. We're doing so much more than just stretching, and you'll see a more impactful improvement in range of motion. So this is something we want to do on both sides, depending on the need. If you are asymmetric, one side's tighter than the other side, you can do additional PAILs and rails contractions on that tighter side, or you can just do that more often throughout the week. But really try to sink into that position, contract, build up in intensity, really let that tissue start to melt a little bit as you get deeper in the range of motion. So that for the exercise of the week this week is the hip external rotation PAILs and rails. Fantastic drill, good spin on the pigeon stretch. So those of you that consistently do the pigeon, think that feels good and that helps you, try the 90-90 hip external rotation. I think you'll see a lot more benefit from this position, a lot more active as you contract those muscles on both sides of the joint, and a huge impact in terms of joint range of motion and strength. Hope you guys enjoyed the video of the week this week. Feel free to drop a comment below, questions, feedback, comments, what have you, and have a great rest of your week. Thanks, guys.